Hey, it's Ryan with this week's Mille Lacs Fishing Report. It's mid-October and Main Lake water temps are about 57 degrees. We've had some peaks and valleys as far as temps go the last week or so. We've had some warmer days and we've had some cooler days. In the fall, I'm typically looking for the cooler days. It gets the fish going, it spurs feeding activity, and we've definitely noticed it in the fishing too. When we have a cold front move through, it usually spurs some good activity. We've had some really great days on the water. When we have a warm front come through and big south winds, it makes things a little bit tougher. We still catch fish, but you definitely look towards the colder days this time of year. And looking at the next 10-day forecast, we have a lot more of those to come. Starting off with the muskie fishing, we had a little bit of success earlier this week. Not a lot of follows, not a lot of activity, but we put a smaller fish in the boat. We were targeting deeper weed lines wherever we could find green cabbage. That's always a key this time of year. You can find a lot of cabbage in the lake, but a lot of it will start dying by this time. So really look for that green stuff. That's where the best activity is going to be. We caught our fish on bucktail, just a normal showgirl, nothing special. I don't think the bait mattered so much as just putting it in front of the fish at the right time. But I'd say to continue fishing those deeper weed lines, the green cabbage, for another week or so. But what I'm going to start changing and shifting my focus towards is rocks at this point. And with these colder temps and the daylight getting shorter and shorter, what I've noticed is out in the main lake, a lot of areas that had tullibee throughout the summer now don't have as many out in the main basin, and areas that are typically thought of as staging areas for the tullibee in the fall, I'm seeing more and more of them show up there. So what I'm going to be doing is kind of shifting gears and moving away from the weeds and start looking for bigger fish more on the rocks. And along with moving my focus to a different portion of the lake is I'm also going to be using different baits when I'm on the rocks. Bucktails are going to continue to work for a while here, but most of my attention is going to be focused on two different baits, and those are crankbaits and swim baits. Crankbaits and swim baits come in a variety of shapes and sizes. A lot of people have their own preferences on that. As far as muskie fishermen go, a lot of times you have a lot of baits, but you only use a few. What I would recommend doing is throwing the largest bait that you're comfortable throwing and picking that out in a couple of different colors. When picking out crankbait colors and swim bait colors, I'm generally going one of two different directions there. I like something that's natural, and I also like something that's very bright. So I kind of hit them with two different color options, something very, very bright and something that just looks like a fish. Now, there's a lot of different areas that you can fish on rock reefs. Typically, the way I generally fish them is I usually go towards the tops. I know a lot of guys will fish points and edges, and they definitely hold fish and they have big fish there. But when I go to the rock piles, usually I'm focusing on the tops of the rock piles, whether they top out at 3 feet or top out at 12 feet. But that's where I'm going to be spending most of my time, around the tops and the edges right off of the tops, throwing those crankbaits, throwing the swim baits. If I'm throwing crankbaits, I'm trying to make a little bit of bottom contact. If I'm throwing swim baits, I'm not trying to do that so much. On to the walleyes. Walleye bite's been pretty decent this last week. What I have been noticing in my boat is during the daytime, throwing swim baits, just the same thing that we've been doing for the smallmouth out here has been catching us walleyes. I would say the best depths to be targeting them right now would be anywhere from 6 to 18 feet of water. And I would say more specifically that 6 to 12 feet of water. Now, on a cloudy, overcast, windy day like we have right now, that 6 to 12 feet is going to be prime. There's a lot of fish up there. A lot of the fish that are on these shallower rocks are, they seem to be in a better feeding mood than some of the fish that have been out on the deeper mud and deeper gravel. So it seems like you get more bites. There might not be as many fish there, but you definitely get more bites, and it seems to be easier to catch them. Another popular option at this time is a jig and a minnow, just a simple jig and a minnow. You can drag them on the bottom along a gravel to rock transition, or you can hop them through the rocks. We just had a few days ago the October full moon. It's kind of a big deal up here on Mille Lacs. A lot of guys like to go out at night, troll crankbaits. It works great, and I went and did it a couple nights ago. I did it on the full moon. There were quite a few boats out on the lake doing it, and I saw a lot of nets flying and a lot of headlamps going. So I know the fish were biting. We were catching them in my boat. It was a good time. And that's going to continue to be an option for another few days to come, and possibly it'll be going still into November too. As far as baits go for trolling the October full moon, um, I'm always partial to blues and silvers, just the blue and silver Smithwick Rogue or blue and silver Husky Jerk. Those are my favorites. If you get a little more cloud cover like we have today, sometimes I'll go with something with more of a painted body. A Fire Tiger can be a good option. But generally, when the moon is out and things are bright, blue and silver is hard to beat. When trolling for the walleyes at night, rock piles are your best bet. I know a lot of guys also troll weed lines too, but I'm pretty partial to doing the rocks. I would say anywhere from 3 to 12 feet of water. My favorite zone to troll is anywhere from about 6 to 10 feet. Usually what I do with my crankbaits, my little stick baits, is I'll put them back about 100 feet back on fire line and run them straight off the back of the boat. It works great. It's worked for years. It continues to work to this day. And finally, moving on to the smallmouth bite. Smallmouth bite's been good. We've had some warmer days, which it doesn't seem like the fish bite as well when it warms up. And then we've had cooler days where we have a front come through and it really seems to spur activity on those fish. The two best methods that we've had in my boat have been either throwing little paddle tail swim baits or dragging bottom. Two of my favorite baits this time of year for dragging bottom are going to be either tubes or Ned Rigs. Generally what I do with those two baits is a little bit different than what I do during the summer. Once we get to the fall, when water temps start getting below 60 degrees and they really start to drop, you got to slow things down a lot. And I'll start using baits that are a little bit different than what I was using during the heat of the summer. Tubes, I'll generally go with a little bit heavier heads. At times, especially as we get late into the fall, I'll start using 3.5 inch tubes instead of the little 2.5 inch tubes. As far as Ned Rigs, instead of using the TRDs, which are so productive all summer, I'll start using something a little bit different. One of my favorite baits to use when water temps cool off is the little craw. It's something that seems like a shoe-in for catching fish year-round, but it really seems to shine when the water temps cool off. And what I believe is the case with that is the TRD actually has a lot of action when it falls. It kind of wiggles its way down to the bottom, whereas the craw, it kind of parachutes its way down, and it makes a pretty big difference in colder water. So those two shapes catch fish throughout the season, but the craw really seems to shine when you get late into the fall. Now, talking structure for smallmouth at this time, the structure is going to be pretty much the same stuff that we've been fishing for the last few weeks. Wherever you can find large rock and boulder, that's going to have fish. The stuff that it had been holding fish in 3 feet of water, as things get colder and colder, I don't think we're going to see as many of them up there. What I would focus on as far as depths is stuff that's deeper than 6 feet. You can find fish from 6 to 18 feet. You can find fish out deeper than that too. But 6 to 18 feet has kind of been my go-to over the last couple weeks. There's a lot of fish in there. I think some days they're moving up a little bit shallower and then moving back off when we get colder days. But there's a lot of fish in that range. Large rock and boulder, that's still the place to be. That's kind of the thing year-round out here. But wherever you can find that type of structure and those depths, you're going to find smallmouth. Another area that works well for smallmouth when water temps cool down is sand to rock transitions. Wherever you can find good, distinct, large areas of sand meeting up with large rock, that's going to hold fish whenever water temps start cooling off. A good way to find that is to use your electronics. Sand shows up really nicely on your side imaging after a couple of windy days. So if you've had a big blow in the past couple days, driving around with your side imaging around rock piles, wherever you know there's transitions, and looking for the little ripples in the sandy bottom with your side imaging is a great way to find those transitions, and it can really pay off as far as catching smallmouth. Hopefully these tips help you out, and have a great weekend.